Yeah, most people don't know how to breathe in the sense that a lot of people breathe through their mouth chronically, and then a lot of people don't know how to breathe into their belly. And my understanding of physiology made me realize, like, oh, like that means that people are usually just like stuck in a low grade sympathetic, like arousal, fight or flight state. So just at a baseline, not even going into like deep breath work or doing breath work all the time, like if people don't understand that, that's like inflammation, stress, chronic illness, just from not breathing properly, just from breathing through your mouth and breathing in your chest.
Welcome to the Power Plant Body Podcast. My name is Taylor, and this show is focused on self-development. I found in my own life, as well as the lives of my clients that I've worked with, that it's human nature to focus on goals in one area of life, or maybe two areas of life if you're lucky, to the detriment of the other areas of your life. For this reason, there's a tool that I use with my clients called the Goal Wheel that is specifically designed to shed light on how you might be preventing yourself from living the fullest life possible. In a nutshell, the Goal Wheel is a circle drawn on a piece of paper that's being divided into 8 quadrants. The 8 quadrants are family and friends, romance, fun and recreation, health and fitness, finances, personal growth and spirituality, career, and physical environment. Basically, you give yourself a score between 1 and 10 for each of these areas of your life, and that allows you to see where you're excelling and putting your attention. But it also shows you the areas of your life that you're currently neglecting. The areas of life that we neglect are often the areas that we need to work on the most. And that's exactly why I started this podcast, to share insights from teachers who are experts in one or more of these areas of the Goal Wheel. Each interview is meant to inspire you to take action in one of those areas so that you can live a more fulfilled and balanced life. To get your hands on a free copy of the Goal Wheel PDF so that you can use it to create meaningful goals and take steps to achieve them, head over to powerplantbody.com/free-tools. You'll find a bunch of other free tools and resources there as well. Today's interview is one that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. About 4 years ago, I met Brian at a yoga studio where he was both a student and a teacher. Not much has changed in that regard because Brian is a man who is full of insights and wisdom because he has an unquenchable sense of curiosity for the world. Brian, along with other movement practitioners like Slava Gulubov, Ido Portal, and Roy Goldschmidt, all have developed a mastery over their body that I admire, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm pretty jealous of. Through his conscious movement practice, he balances strength, aesthetics, and art form. Now, while Brian is very much an expert in health and fitness, most of what we covered today is in the personal development and spirituality quadrant of the Goal Wheel. I'm hoping to have Brian on again in the very near future because he also coaches and teaches on building and maintaining conscious relationships and exploring sexuality. I know that you're going to enjoy what he has to share, so without any further delay, I bring you my conversation with Brian Carew. Brian, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I've known you for quite some time. You were a coach of mine, a friend of mine when I lived in Vancouver. It's been a couple of years since we've had a chance to talk, so I'm looking forward to seeing where you're at and what you're doing. I've kind of been creeping your Instagram a little bit and seeing you're up to some pretty cool stuff. But I would love to invite you to take the next few minutes just to tell me, but also all the listeners and viewers, who Brian is and what you're up to and what your practice is.
Awesome, man. And first and foremost, just thanks for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to dive into these topics, and yeah, it's great to reconnect.
Yeah, brother.
So who am I? Okay, well, I guess in this physical world, my identity is Brian Carew. I have a few labels. I'm a respiratory therapist, a movement coach. I would say a holistic movement coach. And those are like my main areas of work. I also do some content creation and utilize my understanding of like breath work and meditation also to teach people about the energetics of sex, but that's kind of like a random tangent. So yeah, those are kind of the pillars right now. Teaching people to move, teaching people to breathe.
That's awesome. And that's how you and I initially connected. It's closed now, but there was a studio in Vancouver where I was I was a member there, and I took some of your classes, and you were a big inspiration for me because I grew up in the kind of the bodybuilding, weightlifting sort of realm. And I think as you get, at least as I got older, I started to realize the tightnesses that I had, and also saw how people like yourself were able to, like you had achieved a mastery of your body. The way I've always equated it to, or like a metaphor, is imagine like a concert pianist, and they learn all the rules, right? They learn all the scales, they learn all the chords, and they learn how the mechanism works. And they spend all this time learning how it organizes itself. And then one day they've learned it to such a degree that they can forget it all and then play within the rules. And it seemed like you and Slava and the other teachers at the studio had done the work of mastering your body in a similar way, where you could then, like, you can move your body in this beautiful visual of play. And I would love to, maybe we could just start at how that began for you, because I know that you have you were a respiratory therapist, but that whole saga of movement, where did that begin? Who was Brian before that call, and how did it unfold for you?
Absolutely. And thank you again. Well, I always felt really connected to you, Taylor, because where it started for me was weightlifting as well. So I really, and that's where it started for me. And that's really where the roots of my passion for teaching people how to move grew into, if you want to make it a metaphor, into a tree now, is because like I started weightlifting when I was about 17, 18, purely for aesthetics, purely because I saw other guys in my high school working out, and I wanted to look, like a man, or what I thought a man should look like. Mm-hmm. But really, really early on, I realized that was not like speaking to me intuitively. I was like, I was trying to get to be this really, really muscular person. And that's just not really who I am. So I started navigating other things. I thought, okay, I'll try bodyweight training and calisthenics, which I still do. I still actually really love that because I feel like it's a little more applicable to life. But the biggest shift for me was when, at the time, I was married. So this was around when I was 20, 21. My wife introduced me at the time to yoga, which was, I really just liked the concepts, like the spiritual practices and how they applied that to yoga asana or movement. And then I saw Ido Portal move when I was like 20 or 21. And like, there's only a few moments in my life where I've been so sure of things. But when I saw him move, I was like, there was no doubt in my mind. Every fiber of like every cell in my body was alive. And I was just like, I need to learn how to do that. And I remember that day I was like, I went out and started trying weird movement stuff and felt like an idiot and didn't know what I was doing. And, but that's how it began for me. It was just like, I felt this electric pull, this energetic pull towards moving. And I was fascinated, man. I wanted to be free in my body and understand what it's like you described, to just be like, I want to do that in my body and then be able to perform it.
Ido Portal, I remember the first time I saw him too. I didn't get that same calling as you because I looked at it and almost looked at it as like an impossibility. I looked at the way he moved and the way I got out of bed every morning with a few creaks and a few snaps here and there. I looked at him and I was like, that's maybe a few lifetimes I'll get there. But when I look at your Instagram and what you post, your movement, I can definitely see the inspiration from Ido Portal. The cool thing I think about the movement, the movement, I don't know what you'd call it, is that the human body can only move in so many different ways. So some of these things are very similar in the look, but it's going back to that idea or the metaphor of music, like a musician. The scales remain the same, but how it's played by the musician depends on the personality and their creativity that comes up from within. And there's like a certain signature to it. And I feel it's the same with movement. When I see you move, I can see the inspiration from people like Ido Portal for sure, but it's like Brian's expression is coming out from it, if that makes sense. If I'm making sense there.
Oh yeah, totally. I love that you're speaking to this because whatever it is, like my vehicle is movement and other vehicles are, music or art or whatever your vehicle is. But when you bring in, like you said, what this picture that you painted so beautifully of, like you lay foundations and you understand the framework in which you're working, the container in which you're working, and then you can imbue yourself into it. And that's where, for myself, like emotion comes in, and expression. And that's why I really enjoy movement, is because, like, someone can do a handstand or QDR or cartwheel, but when someone masters that skill or has a really understanding of the embodiment, then it becomes something else. It becomes Brian's cartwheel, Taylor's cartwheel. And then that evokes emotions out of people. That's when you start to create responses in people where they're like, wow, like, it's when you see a painting and you're like, wow, like that's like causing something to come in me. That's what I'm fascinated in now, is like, how do we emotionally touch people through our practice and our passions?
That reminds me, this is segueing into a question I have for you about holistic movement and holistic coaching. And I have a feeling it has a lot to do with this integration between what you're after with movement and the emotions that you feel while going through it. Before we dive into that, it reminds me of the very first time I ever took a yoga class. And just to backtrack, this is when I first moved when I first moved to Vancouver. And like, in full transparency, I asked where the best place to meet women in Vancouver was, and someone said a yoga studio. So I got a yoga, so I got a yoga class pass or whatever. And I went into my first class, and the yoga teacher said we were getting into pigeon pose, right? I had no idea what pigeon pose was, but right before we started getting into it, the yoga teacher said, for a lot of people, and especially men, emotions are trapped deep within the hips. And when we get into this pose, don't be surprised if you start getting emotional, if emotions start to surface. And I remember hearing that in my first yoga class ever, hearing that and going, that is the most hippie thing I've ever heard in my life. And then we did it, and then I started getting into this pose, and it was so excruciatingly painful and or difficult, because I was a tight young dude, and all of a sudden emotions and thoughts started to surface for me. And since then, I've realized the connection between emotion and movement, or emotion and different places in your body and whatnot. So I know it's a long story, but I thought I have an inclination that that's part of this holistic movement practice you're coaching other people through. And I would love to hear what that means for you, what holistic movement means for you, and how you coach people through it.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I love that. I love that story. For me, it's speaking to all of the bodies that exist in our human experience. So, and in traditional, or like in physicality or traditional training or fitness, there's so much speaking to this physical body, this physical 3D body. And of course, because it's tangible to the senses, but we know that there's a mental body, like our thoughts. And even deeper than that, there's an emotional body, which is feeling. And that's one of the most subtle, most difficult places to understand, because as soon as you start talking, you're using the mental body to explain the emotional body. So in my practices, or like in my coaching, how I structure an experience is, getting people in a state where I can speak or to their subconscious, or like speak to their emotional body, prime their mind so that they're in a state where it's more about feeling what's going on and celebrating the feeling, as opposed to focusing so much on what their physical body is doing. Because if someone can get used to feeling good moving, that's much more important for me as a coach than them getting excited about an outcome, because the outcome is a process. Mm-hmm. The physical body will adapt, but the mind needs to be there first. Mm-hmm. We need someone to believe they can see that future that has not occurred yet, maybe even be grateful for it. So for me, that's what it is. It's recognizing that we're more than just our physical body, and then using some tools and techniques to elicit those responses.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that idea of these layers of who you are, as an individual. And that concept of working towards a goal, having a goal in mind, or having like an idea of what you want to be able to achieve in the future, and working towards that, implementing processes to help you and your clients get there, every week or every month, but making the the focus of the practice, the here and now, and as a vehicle to what, from what it sounds like, as a vehicle to feel those different layers of who you are as a person. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, totally, man. Like, really emphasis on the feeling, because I think people, they think that's their feeling, but like you experienced in doing that pigeon pose, like all these emotions come up, and sometimes people will bypass that too. They're like, oh, like that's just pain. But like, I mean, going even a little bit deeper, like our body holds on to a lot of things, memories, of course, which can be words, but our emotional body can hold on to feelings, and we can have like trauma that's just a feeling, or we can have things that we believe that are feelings. Like I feel like I can't move in that way. And so I like to get people in like a state where I make them feel good through a meditation. I'm like, imagine a time that you felt really in power of your body, like you felt really good. And then your brain's starting to produce all these neurochemicals. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It's like for your brain that's happening right now. And then I'm like, okay, let's pretend that's happening now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, man. Like it's like now people are more willing and able, and without them realizing, sometimes I'll tell them up front, but without them realizing, they're just like much more willing to step into things they wouldn't be able to, or wouldn't want to, because they feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, that starting with the meditation and getting into the mindset. I feel like now more than ever, people are more open to that idea of the power that your thoughts and your mental set point before you go into something has so much to do with I don't want to use the word outcome, but how the rest of the process goes. I think, anybody who doubts the power of your mind's ability to, to change your current surroundings and current experience, just close your eyes and imagine being that your toes are hanging over the end of a cliff and look down 100 feet, and your heart rate's going to start racing, and your blood pressure is going to go up. And that's it. The only thing that changed was you had a tiny little vision in your mind of the circumstances. So maybe we could take we know that process started from going after one thing because you felt inclined to go after it because all the other guys were going after it, which is this, a lot of guys, 17, 18 years old, decide to go into the gym. That seems like the outlet. But you eventually found your way to this more holistic approach to fitness, but pure expression really is probably, the fitness side of things comes, from what I can tell, as an after effect of this this method of expressing yourself in an ever authentic way. Something that I've always been interested about in your journey specifically is that I knew you when you were practicing respiratory therapist, which takes a lot of schooling to become a respiratory therapist. Once you do become a respiratory therapist, you're in super high demand. It's a very lucrative career. And for a lot of people, once they became a respiratory therapist, or once they had that, take it to a future of financial independence, and it's just a clear path, and they would just stick with it. But you decided to leave respiratory therapy to pursue this endeavor of helping people and coaching people to express themselves through movement, get more in touch with their emotions through movement. It's a path few would travel. So I'm curious as to what caused you to question the path that you're on and ultimately make the decision to go full-time into coaching people through movement and emotion.
Yeah, most certainly. So respiratory therapy is a great place to work. Like, it offered me a lot of tools, but immediately when I was in this working environment, especially, like Western medicine being so heavy or emphasizing so much the allopathic side, that really didn't resonate with me. And I always kind of felt like it was a stepping stone towards a larger purpose. I decided that this is like, it's been in my heart. Like I wanted to teach people how to move. So I really I honored that. I didn't know exactly when it would happen. Funny enough, it happened in the middle of a worldly pandemic, or when,
Yeah.
it would be the worst decision to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really saw like, okay, well, I'll tell a story. Story is always powerful. I
Mm-hmm.
remember there's like, what are they called? The head RT. I can't remember what the name is, but they're basically running the show for whoever is on, whoever's working at VGH, and RTs work everywhere, like in Emerge and surgery and ICU primarily. And I remember looking at this guy. Nothing against him, but he's very overweight. All he talked about is like overtime, 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 get a house, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is my future.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I get to look forward to, is someone who's like, all they want to do is work overtime and, have a house and like a, traditional life. And that's fine if you want that. But for me, I was like, no, if I'm going to teach people how to breathe, if I'm going to teach people how to be healthy, I think there's a more powerful way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I stuck in that for a while, practiced for about 5 years, and took a lot of those skills, those Western skills of like science and leverage, and started like using those more to speak to esoteric concepts. And I don't know, man, it was just, I felt it in my heart. I was like, I can't
Yeah.
not honor myself in that way and follow the path that I was being directed towards.
I want to move into how you use breath work, because that's a super powerful tool, I know, for you and your clients. And there's a lot more attention being put on the power of the breath in mainstream media. But before we get there, there's actually, I think I'm picking up on a parallel between when you were younger and you were going to the gym and you felt called to go more into this expressive movement-based type of, I call it fitness if you want, but just expression, and essentially going against the grain, but listening to, you saw Ido Prodal and you listened to that voice. As soon as you heard it, you said, this is what I need. This is how I need to move forward in my life. There was a calling, there was a purpose behind it, and you listened to it. And it sounds like there was a very similar moments in your life with respiratory therapy. This career track had been laid out before you, and there are a lot of people that would pursue it and get the house and get the mortgage and do all the things that are required of us these days. But you had this calling inside of you, and you listened to it yet once more, and it sounds like that deep sense of purpose, or that deep call, is a guide stone in a lot of areas of your life. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. That's always been there. Yeah.
When you think about that compass, is that something that you cultivated, or was it always there? I imagine that I'm sure that you've encountered people that maybe don't have that, or are starting to listen for it or search for it in themselves. The work that you do, a lot of it is like that holistic approach. You're helping people move through emotion, move through their body. And I imagine that a lot of that underneath that is eventually surfaces a purpose or a guide for the individual. How did you cultivate that? How did you start listening to it for yourself? And how have you seen other people start to surface this sense of purpose in their own lives?
Yeah, I love this question. Let's see, there's a couple of things. Like, I think all of us are shaped by our childhood. There's this kind of pattern of the unresolved traumas that our parents bestow upon us. Not their fault. We're all encompassed by this.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother, like I love my mother. She's an amazing person. She just was like she poured a lot of emotion onto me. And at a very young age, I was like, I need to be an emotional rock for my mother.
Mm.
And in that formation of identity, to my belief, I believe that I held on to an idea that I must get through, and like things will always work out. So that's something that has always just been a part of who I am. And then when I started introducing or bringing in spiritual concepts, especially yoga, a lot of yoga teaching asks you to look inside instead of outside. And this is something I really teach to in my coaching. I always remind people, I'm like, all I do is set out a path for you and you do the work. I'm not doing any work. You're doing it all. And this is something I think that our society could really learn from, is that the outside, like the world is not happening to you. You're happening to the world. What you're putting yourself out there, and the stuff that you put out is what you get back. And it's just a shift of locus of control, if you will. Like, people think things are happening to them, like, oh, I have bad luck, I have good luck. Like, I believe that what happens, what I see in the world and what we create and what we're around is starts here first. So when I get these inclinations, or if I'm like really drawn towards something, I think that's really valuable. I think it should be listened to. I know this might get really woo-woo, but I believe, let's go into the woo, man. Like, I think this physical reality is a byproduct of consciousness, and consciousness is within us. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it is not, like, a lot of people have it backwards, and they think that, like, again, things are coming at them and the world's happening and they're just a byproduct. And it's like, I hope my day goes well. It's like, my thinking is, my day is how I construct it. I create these things, and then sometimes source or the universe directs me towards something in a feeling or an emotion or a coincidence. And I just trust that now. I'm like, hey, that's what it is. I will believe that.
Yeah, as much woo-woo as you want to bring in, I'm all for it, because I love it, and I agree with everything that you said. And for personally, for me, I'm like this. I walk this duality where I'm like, on one side, I'm just right into the woo-woo stuff, and I just eat it all up. And then on the other side, it's like the younger version of myself, the hyper rational look at it from, like a ones and zeros, very binary, viewpoint. The quote that I always come back to, though, when I find myself moving too far into the realm of hyper rational, is from Eleanor Roosevelt. And she was asked once if she believed in reincarnation. And she said, I don't think it would be any stranger to wind up in another life as it was to wind up in this one. And the reason why I love that is because when I'm feeling hyper rational and I'm kind of starting to get into that mode of like, oh yeah, I know everything, it reminds me of, the fact, okay, that we're speaking to each other through the internet right now. That's already, that is absurd. But the fact that we're this perfect symphony of microorganisms that have somehow all come together into this, thing that we call a human vessel that has evolved over, hundreds of millions of years from single-celled organisms, to have this conversation that we just decided to strike up over the internet, that's completely absurd. So anytime you feel like, oh, that couldn't be real, like, whether or not it's like you're a larger part of the universe than maybe you lead yourself to believe at times, that might be a little strange to think of if you just take all this for granted. But if you take a step back and realize how absurd life is to begin with, it becomes a little bit easier to, entertain.
Oh, I really like that, man. I might have to take that one from you.
Yeah,
that's so good.
I stole it from Eleanor Roosevelt, so feel free.
Sharing is caring, right? Yeah. It's exactly. Like, when you actually look at this world and how profound it is, and that makes me think about how, like, science. I come from science, and sometimes I get in these discussions with people where they're like, "Well, that's not measurable," and this, and I'm like, "Yeah, but everything wasn't measurable until it was." And, like, I don't know. It's just there is now. This is a really interesting age where old technology and new technology are starting to recognize and see each other, and we can measure, like, the electromagnetic field that's around us. We can measure delta wave in the brain when people are in deep meditation and having, like, mystical experiences. So, all this stuff. It's just a matter. We may not be able to measure it, but we've always had these tools accessible to us.
It's a beautiful time to live in. I think the interesting thing is it's kind of, actually I had a guy on, Rainer Wild. He's a really interesting guy. He comes from a psychotherapist background. He was a professor, and he's he now is just a coach, or I shouldn't say just a coach. Because it's probably he's doing more good as a coach now probably than he ever did as a professor or a psychotherapist. I don't want to take away from the idea of a coach, but what I'm saying is that he in the way that you're speaking to, you're coming from science, but you're entertaining this, you're bridging the gap to the quote unquote woo woo. And he's doing a very similar thing. And I think the beautiful thing about the time that we live in is that the science that we're using, the science that is of our time is starting to tell us that some of the things that we believed a few thousand years ago might actually be true, but we didn't actually need the science to tell us that. But it just feels a little bit better to have it,
Yeah, for the doubtful minds, it's like that's great, and it's interesting. It's cool because then one benefit of the measuring is that it gives people more tools as to how to approach these things. Because sometimes sometimes they are very, very difficult, or could take years and years to have like a profound, out of body, mystical, life changing experience. But then I think when we start to measure them and understand like what it is and what it is not, per se, then maybe there's more opportunity to raise consciousness or give people these tools that are truly like just mind-blowing things that can occur in the body, and very, very simple stuff like breathing, for example. This amazing tool for us to literally like experience everything. It's mad.
Let's dive into it. So breathing, breath work, that's Googled probably more than a lot of things these days. Breathwork, it's a hot topic, but I don't think that many people really understand what breathwork is, and especially maybe not the benefits that it can have on your emotional and your physical state. So, how to use breathwork? How did you get into it? And what are some of the benefits that you've seen in yourself and your clients?
Yeah, breathwork. It's funny, almost the name of it, like breath work, like I have to work to breathe. What? Yeah. But how did I get started? Respiratory therapy was definitely like a good opener for me, but I was already kind of practicing pranayama, which is like the yoga version of like prana's energy, moving breath. But honestly, like for many years, I was never consistent with a breathing practice. I had these, and be on and off. I started doing Wim Hof probably like 5 years ago, and would be very intense with it and then stop, very intense. So it took me a while to like integrate things into my body and then feel actually comfortable teaching to them. But let's see. So yeah, I've always been kind of dabbling with it for the past 10 years. And then, sorry, one of your questions, do you say like, how do I implement it, or I'm kind of getting lost here?
Well, no, that's so you were a respiratory, well, technically you still are a respiratory therapist, right? Like you're a certified respiratory therapist. So, that skill set that you attain, you mentioned that you have some, like you carried some of that into your work today, both with yourself and with your clients in breath work. So what are some of the things that you've learned through respiratory therapy, and how have you integrated those into likely some of the new understandings or the new ideas that you have about breath and how it relates to your emotional and your physical body?
Yeah. Great. So in respiratory therapy, like the way that we learn in the West, it's very much focused on mechanical ventilation and those type and respiratory pulmonary, cardiopulmonary anatomy and physiology. So that deep understanding allowed me to speak to what is actually going on in the body, and then understanding like what breathing is and what is breathing normal, what's not breathing normal. Most people don't know how to breathe. Like they breathe in their yeah. I mean, we're all students of breath at the end of the day. Yeah. Most people don't know how to breathe in the sense that a lot of people breathe through their mouth chronically, and then a lot of people don't know how to breathe into their belly, and my understanding of physiology made me realize like, oh, like that means that people are usually just like stuck in a low grade sympathetic like arousal, fight or flight state, So just at a baseline, not even going into like deep breath work or doing breath work all the time, like if people don't understand that, that's like inflammation, stress, chronic illness, just from not breathing properly, just from breathing through your mouth and breathing in your chest. So that's something that I wanted to bring in and started teaching people about, like, the importance of breathing through your nose, how it's a filter, how it heats it up, all that kind of relationship. And then from there, like when people start to understand how to breathe that way, like it's an anchor. I see it as an opportunity for people to like come right into the present moment, and then things start to expand from there. Like depending if you want to do like a 5-minute or a longer session, but you can have really profound experiences just from moving breath and shifting your physiology by breathing a bunch.
Yeah. When you were mentioning breathing through your mouth, I caught myself breathing through my mouth first and foremost. So I started trying to breathe through my nose. But the second thing is you mentioned breathing shallowly, or sometimes not even breathing at all, and how it affects your physiology, your stress levels. And I catch myself doing that all the time, where I'll be seemingly unstressed. I actually caught myself doing this when I was doing food prep the other night. I was just listening to a podcast and doing food prep, like meal prep. And I realized that I was like super tight here. Like it was just, everything was sucked up in here, and I was just breathing in the very top of my chest. And I wasn't breathing. Like I would take a tiny little short breath, and then I wouldn't breathe. And I'd take a tiny little short breath. And then when I relaxed my shoulders, and I started breathing deep into my belly and long breaths, I didn't realize how stressed I was in that seemingly unstressed moment until I released it through breathing. And I can only imagine that the people that you work with, if they've never heard of breath work before, and you take them through an initial meditation or breath work practice, that contrast between how they've probably lived their entire life with the shallow breathing and stressed breathing to how in an instant they can feel de-stressed and more calm and more present is probably profound in most of the people that you take through that initial session.
Yeah, it can be really riveting for people. And even in very, very short amounts of time, like, that's why I utilize like not really long breathwork sessions, but anchoring to the breath, and then utilizing focus on the body for breath. It's just a lot, like you said, a lot of people, one, they don't realize, and then two, it's the contrast of like, breathing in your chest and then going to breathe in your belly and having that moment where you're like, whoa, I was very, very stressed out. And just to add also context for, everyone listening and like people who listen to this, none of this is like breathing in your chest isn't bad necessarily. Breathing in your belly isn't the best necessarily. It's all context dependent. And the context I'm speaking to is the Western society where we're almost like, the analogy to be made is like there's a saber-toothed tiger constantly chasing us, which is like advertisement, stress, social media, blah, blah, blah. So it's all context dependent. That mechanism of flight and fright, or flight, you know what I mean? Sympathetic
fight
arousal.
Yeah, fight or flight.
Yes, fight or flight. It has its purpose. It has its purpose, and it's there for a reason. But and this is, again, something in the West we don't talk about either. It's like people are like, this is good and this is bad. Nothing is good and bad. It depends on the context. Like if you're in the Sahara Desert, water, it's great. If you're in the ocean, water is not the thing you're looking for. So yeah.
There's a couple different directions I want to go, because I guess I have a question about your movement and breath. Because when I see you move, so for anybody who's not seen you move, the way I look at it is, you can think of, it's very similar to dance. It's very similar to dance, but it seems like, I don't know how to say this properly, but like, it seems like interpretive dance in a more directed approach, or like a more, there's like forms that seem to continually take shape when you're working through your movement flow. that give it more of an organized feel while still seeming loose and fluid and interpretive, right?
Mm.
When you're moving, but the thing that where I was going with that is the movements that you are doing are, while you make them look easy, are incredibly challenging. They're they require a tremendous amount of shoulder stability, shoulder strength, core stability, core strength, hip flexibility, and mobility and strength. When you are moving through those shapes and expressing yourself through movement, is breath a big component of that? Are you conscious of how you're breathing through those different shapes?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And oddly enough, like the breath, it's taken me a long time to really understand moving and breath and how impactful it is. But just like anything else in life, if you're not breathing, you're not doing much, or you're not doing much very well. So learning to breathe while I do these dynamic movements and and practice mainly I practice what you're describing, like movement flow, this system, and why there's those similarities, like you're saying, like there's this system and structure, but within that there's like endless possibilities to create these flows. But that's something actually, oddly enough, more I'd say new about the practices. I'm starting to realize what is the difference between an in and out breath during certain movements, or during the eccentric or concentric movement of, like, let's say like a handstand push-up, or like, do I want to hold my breath for a moment? Like, for example, powerlifting, there's these retentions and core bracing. Is that beneficial, or do I keep things flowing? And I think the answer is yes, there's a place for it all. But at the foundation of it is, if you're not aware of your breath, you're probably holding your breath, or it's not flowing like it should be.
Yeah. So intention
Exactly.
behind it.
Hopefully it becomes competent unconsciousness.
Yeah. Love that. Well, on that idea of intention, you have something that you practice, is that you perform with a lot of your new clients, as I understand it, is the five. I'm going to get it wrong. The 5-day morning motivation challenge, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that in your life, it seems like from what I know of you and your actions I've had with you, that, and even just everything that you shared, especially on breathwork in this conversation, intention is at a lot of the foundation of the things that you practice and the things that you preach with your clients. So that 5-day morning motivation challenge, I had to look at it because I would have messed it up somehow if I didn't look at what I wrote. That 5-day morning motivation challenge, I'd love to know what that entails. And I know that there is an intention for you as a coach behind that and what someone will get out of it. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of intention that people will build through that 5-day challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. The 5-day morning motivation challenge there's a couple pillars. First and foremost, it's about getting clear on who you want to be and who you're becoming, and accepting the reality that change, like who we are, we will become a different person over time. So do you want to be intentional about that change, or do you want to let it happen by chance? And so in the 5 days, and then the other pillar would really be community and creating relationships based on the future reality you want. But in those 5 days, like my portion, I offer this with my business partner. He's a lifestyle optimization coach, and I bring in movement and breath work. And we start these sessions off by creating a peak state through breath work and meditation. So people are primed, they're ready, they feel good. And then we offer them future self journaling prompts while they're in that state, so that they have the capacity to imagine beyond the linear thinking and beyond the usually non-imaginative state of a human or of an adult mind, of like, okay, in 5 years, if anything's possible, who are you? What are you doing? How much money are you making? What are you like? What is your life? And then by the end of the 5 days, usually people they've had a taste of like, wow, like I feel good every single day. Things are possible beyond what I thought. And that's really the intent, is like, getting people more clear, more motivated, and showing them that, 30 minutes, an hour of your day in the morning can like radically change your productivity and your energy towards your life.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned something in there that when I first met you, so Dharma Movement Company, that was what it was called, right? Dharma Movement Company? Is that the
Yeah,
studio?
Dharma Movement. Yep.
Yeah. That's where I met you. It's no longer there. It was a yoga studio, or a movement studio, I should say. And you said community, a big part of this, the 5-day challenge is a part of it, at least is the community aspects of it. And from what I know of you and from Dharma, that was huge. For something that you really contributed to was a sense of community there. And from what I can tell, what you're doing right now, like you've from my perspective, you're a big part of the local movement scene in Vancouver. You're a conscious creator of the community. In Vancouver. 2021 and 2020, we're moving more online, right? Just circumstantially, we're not able to get together as we would have liked to, as we used to, as communities. And Dharma there was so much personal growth for me during that time, just from being around people who were expressing themselves in ways that I wasn't able to, but wanted to, and just through proximity was able to like level myself up. So community was a huge part of my experience there. I know that community is something that you really do. You do a really great job creating it. How are you? And I know that you're doing a really good job in 2020 and 2021, even though things are online more than ever. How are you doing that? What is the process of creating meaningful, deep connections in a community sense in the times that we find ourselves in today, when we're not able to connect in a one-to-one or in a live setting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good question, man. I think that being in person, there's nothing that will totally parallel that, but the online setting it can be really, really powerful so long as there's a willingness to be courageous and offer vulnerability and kind of like let go of the masks. And like when I coach, a lot of it is, trying to peel people's masks away. And especially in the 5-day morning motivation challenge, through those 5 days, there's a lot of vulnerability shared. There's a lot of, resistance. And there's pushing on our end, like from both Josh and I. It's like, oh, someone's like, might be like, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, why is that important to you? Oh, cause then I'll look good. Why is that important to you? Oh, well, cause I never really thought about it. Well, is it really that important to you? Or are you just doing so I think there's a lot of potential for it. And then also, like, I've learned from teaching online that there's way more people that I can speak to. And like, I've created some communities, like people from Chile, people from Ireland, people from Europe and South America. Now we've made all these connections, even though we're not in person. It's like people who I'd never really think about connecting with. So there's that urge to have the in-person connection. But I think if you're willing to be honest with yourself and ask good questions and step forward, and create community and offer those opportunities, there can be really emotional and powerful moments in the online setting. Yeah.
That's really cool. I think the idea of being able to connect with someone halfway around the world, and there's a good chance that you'll never actually meet in person, right? But still having the ability to create a safe setting for someone to open up about the things that are challenging them the most in life and the things that they want to surmount the most in life, and be open and honest about the things that are currently preventing them from expressing those things. It's different, like you say, but there is something beautiful about being able to connect with someone from the other side of the world in such a meaningful, deep way, knowing full well that there's a chance you'll never actually meet in person, but you've connected at a level that most people don't connect on with people that they know their entire life and meet in person their own entire life. It's Pretty neat concept, really.
Yeah, it's exactly. And it's an interesting paradox because I think this screen offers a little bit of safety, and especially on Zoom, like maybe people feel, okay, there's a barrier in between. And then that can go two ways, right? People can think, oh, there's a barrier in between, I'm not going to get as much out. But from my experience, I don't think that's the case, because what I always speak to possibility. So if I'm coaching someone online, or if we're having, coaching movement or life coaching in these like 5-day morning motivation challenge experiences, people are doing all of the work on their own. I'm not there assisting them. So that is a really potent opportunity for me to remind them that, yes, I'm offering you this knowledge or guidance, but that's all it is. And you're doing everything. You're doing it all. So there's an opportunity, like you mentioned, like duality sometime at the beginning. Everything exists equally in its opposite. So this is a large barrier, but can also be used as a large potential for connection. If we see that, like, okay, yeah, like I can't be with you, but the energetics and, like even right now, like we're giving each other energy, we're vibing, we're in flow. It's like you can feel it. So there's something there. There's a tether being created, even though it's like I don't get to sit in your presence and enjoy that.
Yeah. This is kind of off on not a entirely different tangent, but you said something that I really believe in, and it might just be the eternal naive optimist in me. I don't know. but people, like, for instance, like we're connecting through the internet right now, and most people are, like you say, through Zoom or some other medium because of the times that we're in, and that can be looked at as a hurdle to get over, or it can be looked at as a new opportunity, a new tool to dive into deeper, more meaningful connection with people in a different way. And I've always thought about, like, if we take a look at the perils that we find ourselves in today as a global society, some of the things that we look at as the biggest instigators of the peril that we find ourselves in, like the oil and gas industry or the textiles industry, for that matter, it's easy to look at them as like a negative, like a succubus on the, on the earth. But there's like you say, everything exists in its opposite, and the ability for those companies to affect massive amount of change, if they decide to change direction, it could never be duplicated by small startups. Oh, I shouldn't say could never be, but it would take a much longer time. So let's say that Shell Oil or for, to take the textiles industry, if Zara or some other textiles company decided to change their business practice to pay people better wages in the poorest places in the world and build infrastructure in those places, they could take what was formerly a really negative stimulus on the world and completely change it into a new positive direction. I know that's off on a tangent, but the whole reason I bring it up is because I think often, like when you speak about dualities, I think often it's so easy for us to look at the pessimistic side of things, the barriers that we have to cross, rather than look at it as a new launch pad for something that, if we looked at it in a different way, could bring even more good and prosperity or generativity to our lives.
Absolutely, man. I think it's, especially in these times, it's a really important topic of conversation, that because, like, for example, like with Movement Flow, my mentor and the founder, Slava, when I approached him, I was like, I believe we should go online. I was resistant to it too, but he was like, I don't really know how I feel about that. And now there's, like, we do trainings online, privates online, like it's a pillar of the business. So my approach has always been in life is like, this is what it is. The universe doesn't play sides. The universe doesn't think that there's a good and bad. It just is. And it's our opportunity. It's our choice. It's our responsibility to see how we're going to, what meaning we're going to place onto that. And like you said, like, this whole pandemic is not a great situation, but there's a lot, like, within such darkness, the tiniest bit of light shines very, very brightly. So there's a lot of opportunity for innovation and new perspectives and interesting truths to come up. It shines light on things that we may have been complacent about before. So again, it's like, it's all perspective, like shifting, like I love your mention of like Shell and like these textiles, because like we're all usually playing at the money game. We're winning really well at that game, capital. But if we
Yeah.
change perspectives and make it about quality of life or human life, the game changes completely to, well, we don't really care if we actually keep on making capital each year. We care about if the people are happy and living good lives. So it's just a shift of perspective, and I have hope that it will. But yeah, that's at the end of the day, I definitely think that's an awesome point to bring up.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Again, wherever you fall on that spectrum, whether you're a hyper rationalist or into the more esoteric woo woo stuff, hopefully you're somewhere in the middle. You're open to both sides, maybe leaning a little bit more to the esoteric, but, at the end of the day, like you say, the way you reframe things, or the way you frame things, I should say, not even reframe, just the way you perceive and you decide to interpret your surroundings will actually change your world. So you can look at something as a hindrance to your enjoyment of the world, or you can look at it you can look at the exact same circumstance as a lesson and something to help you enjoy the next moment even more than this one. The situation itself has not changed, but your understanding, interpretation, and ability to navigate it has. And if you are leaning a little bit more into the esoteric realm, the more you focus on things and expand those things that you want to put your focus onto, there's a good likelihood that at the very least you'll be more aware to similar occurrences when they're in your vicinity, so you can put your focus on them, or they just might be attracted into your experience as well by some woo-woo magic. Who knows? But regardless, that ability to ultimately the only control we have is in how we perceive the world around us, how we decide to emotionally engage with it. So the ability to exercise that control whenever possible is a worthwhile endeavor. I want to be very mindful of your time, because I know we're close to going over, and I don't want to keep your day. I have two more questions for you. I know you're an online coach, and you do community coaching, but you also do one-on-one coaching. Who's the ideal someone listening to this right now, and something's resonating with them right now? There's something going, this Brian guy's got something, I want it. What is it that they're looking for, and how are you going to help them get to that next version of themselves?
Yeah, great question. Well, first and foremost, there's a lot of barriers to moving, or to finding coaching, or to doing most things, depending on where you are. So I feel for the people who are into movement or trying to keep up some sort of physical practice, going in through an online coaching experience or an online class is definitely worth the value in this. And everything we spoke to, like, there is an energetic line being created, but it's the most empowering experience, because you know that, like, if I go into a class online, I know that I'm doing the work. And then coming back to the mindset, it's just believing that I will get value out of this experience. Like, if I apply myself, this is something I tell my clients all the time. They're like, you think I can do a handstand? You think I can do this? I'm like, yes, if you do the work. If you show up with me and you do the work, I won't make you do anything that's unsafe. We'll be in your process. But if you show up and do the work, you can do whatever you want, and whether that's in person or online. So I think it's a willingness to ultimately, like, take on a new approach, something that may not be comfortable. But at the end of the day, it's just asking ourselves, like, do I want to be upset about the circumstances, or do I want to, again, like, see it as an opportunity to go a different route?
Love that. So there's never been a better time to take up online coaching for people, because there's very little choice otherwise. But the value that they'll get out of that is the guidance from someone who's been there before, someone who's an accountability partner in that journey, someone who takes a deeper approach, not just focusing on the movement aspect, but how that integrates with the other bodies that you mentioned, like the emotional and spiritual bodies that that movement permeates. Someone listening to this right now, wants to reach out to you and connect and become a client, how do they know that they're ready for that? How do they know that that's the step they're ready to take? And how do they then reach out to you?
Yeah. So, what I have in place, I don't have a website right now. I usually just do everything through my Instagram, but the link in my Instagram, I have an application form that I usually send to people who are interested in my services. And that gives me a clear idea, because the question is just ask them like what their experience is, what their goals are. So it gives me an idea of like what I'm working with. And for like on this topic, what's most important to me is not getting clients. It's understanding if I can provide them value. I want to have fun and I want them to have fun. If we're both having fun, that's the best thing. So if I see that someone's like not really, they're just focused on one skill, or they don't see the value in the process. Like I really do emphasize working with people for at least 4 weeks, because short-term investment equals short-term results.
Totally.
So that just gives me an understanding as to, can I really offer this person value? Is it going to be fun for me? Because when I'm having fun and I'm in good energy, it's just a better exchange. So that's usually the best way. If people are like interested in my services, I get them to do my application form, and then we start a dialogue on email, and I kind of go from there, so I can understand like what's important to them. What do they really want to get out of this? Why do they want to learn how to move? Like what ultimately, because maybe they want to get better at moving, but that serves something else. They want to feel more confident. They want to be able to show up for their family. They want to be healthy in old age. They don't want to worry about, being crippled at some point. Like there is a deeper why, and I really want to understand that, so that they really feel like they're getting something more than just moving out of the experience.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I will. So it's at Carew. Sorry, I always say Carew. It's at Carew _movement, right?
Yeah. That's the Instagram. And, one of these days I got to get a website. I got a website for my other stuff, but if people go there,
websites, honestly, websites are, they're so 1993, really, if you have an Instagram and you have a link to a form where people, the whole idea behind a website is so that people can understand who you are, what you offer, get a better sense for, the person that they're engaging with. And a website is a very poor second compared to Instagram, where you're constantly updating what you're up to, the things that you're working on personally, and the things that you're working on with your clients. So websites are okay to have, but I think your Instagram is a very good place to start sending people to learn more about you and fill out the application form.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's true. It does serve that purpose, and it's like all I need is that link. So, and that's usually the process for me. It hasn't gone to the point where, or I don't think it ever will. Like I don't want to scale up to the point where I'm not interacting with my clients. Like I enjoy that process. Like that for me is more important. May not be the best business model, but I'm very rich in my communities and my relationships. So that's what makes me happy.
Wealth is measured a lot of different ways, right? That reminds me of a story that I'm not going to bore everybody with, but it's the guy who goes down to Mexico and meets the fishermen on the beach. Have you ever heard that one?
Like the teaching the fish?
No, I'll tell you another time.
Okay.
No,
next
next time. But so I want to be respectful of your time. I have one last question for you. I've known you for a number of years now, and I've seen, you're seemingly like, we're all onions, we all have various layers to us. You're someone who's actively peeling those layers off and learning more about what's underneath and sharing that experience with the people that you interact with, whether in person or online. The question that I like to ask people who are on social media like yourself is, often it's easy for people to misunderstand those that they're following on Instagram or, whatever social media platform. So what's a way that you're often misunderstood? And how would you like to come across? What would you like more people to know about who Brian is and what he has to offer and how he expresses himself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that, just because the highlight reels that are social media, it can be a very toxic thing for our mental health. I think what I want people to know first and foremost, is that I struggle with my movement practice as well. And I get down on my like I've to love my body in the way that I do now, it's taken years, and there's still that struggle. And another thing, like, I mean, this is a deep topic, but we'll just skim the surface. Like for several years, I suffered from binge eating and bulimia. I would get in these purging cycles and overeat, and it was like it was one of the hardest things for me to face and get over. And people would be like, oh, but you're in shape. Like, how could that be a thing for you? And so I think what I'm trying to say is that we all look outside, especially at social media, to someone else's practice or whatever they're doing and think, if I just had what they had. But everyone is enveloped in the same mental construct of doing that. Like, so be compassionate with yourself. It's a process. And if you ever want to feel good about yourself, just look back at where you came from, because you're not the same person anymore. And yeah, so we're all in this together. Like, that's the connection we can make, is that, like, I suffer and struggle, you suffer and struggle. Maybe I have different skills, but that's beautiful, because then we can offer these skills to each other.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I love that. And, in the future, if you have time for it, I'd love to bring you on again to talk about that specifically, because depending on how open you are about it, that's something that is often not spoken about. And specifically binge eating, men, there's bulimia, binge eating, and anorexia, right? And of the three, binge eating, I think 2/3 of the people who suffer from it are men, and no one talks about it. And the fact that you are is, very, I appreciate you talking about it, is where I'm going. So beautifully said. Brian, I appreciate you being on the podcast. You're a wealth of inspiration, and a truly just inspirational person in every way imaginable. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, man. Yes. And I'm an open book. I think it's important we talk about these things, especially the bulimia. And thank you for having me on, man. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing, giving people the opportunity to have, access to this knowledge, and having me on. I appreciate you, man. This has been lovely.
Thank you again for checking out this episode of the Power Plant Body Podcast. If you enjoyed it, I'd be grateful if you left it a rating and review on iTunes. When you leave a rating and review, it really helps, because it lets iTunes know, and they'll be more likely to promote it to others who could also benefit from hearing these conversations. And feel free to share it with people who could also benefit from hearing Brian's insights into conscious movement, community, and self-development. You can head over to Instagram to find Brian. His Instagram handle is @Carew_movement. That's spelled at CAREW_MOVEMENT. And in his bio, Brian has a link to his coaching application form so that you can start mastering your body as well. And there's also a ton of other great resources in that link. So don't forget to go over there and check them out. And lastly, remember to head over to powerplantbody.com/free-tools to get your hands on a free copy of the Goal Wheel PDF, along with a ton of other free tools and resources. I'm regularly adding new tools and resources to that page to help you create the best version of yourself, so you'll definitely want to bookmark it. You can find me on Instagram at The Vegan Trainer. That's at TheVeganTrainer. And feel free to send me a DM if you have any questions at all or suggestions for future episodes. Thank you again for spending some time with me and Brian today. I'll see you in the next episode.